You and I experience the world in five senses, not just with our eyes. In this talk, I'm going to explore the enormous power of sound, and I hope I'll leave you with a new understanding of why and how it must always be carefully considered in branding and in marketing. The bottom line is that sound affects us all profoundly. It's been doing that to you since before you had ears. This is the first sound you ever heard. Your mother's heartbeat. It was very loud in the womb, 85 decibels plus. Hearing was the first sense you developed, just 12 weeks after conception. Before your ears had even developed, you were hearing with your whole body. You're actually still doing that now, though we tend to assume that only the ears are working. Dame Evelyn Glennie is profoundly deaf, but she learned to listen with every cell of her body, and she's now a world-renowned percussionist. However, your ears are the specialists. They're always on. You have no earlids if you haven't noticed, and they're working even when you sleep. We hear in a sphere. I don't know about you, I'm not very good at seeing what's behind me, but we can certainly hear it, which is why hearing is our primary warning sense, hardwired into the precortical brain. You actually react to sound far faster than you react to vision. Sound goes very deep, very fast. And given all this, it's tragic that most people's relationship with sound is a little bit like this. For reasons we'll explore in a moment, we're in the habit of suppressing our consciousness of sound. The eyes have it largely, particularly in this age of screens, though, as we'll see, that may soon be ending. Well, we can try to ignore it, but even when we're not paying attention, sound affects you and me in four powerful ways. Here's the first. Sorry about that. That's a little shot of cortisol, your fight-flight hormone. Any sudden sound will be interpreted like that. It's the safest thing, and we've learned that over a long, long period. If your alarm clock at home sounds anything like that, I do suggest you change it. It's not very good for you to wake up to that kind of sudden sound. Let me calm you down again. This is surf, gentle surf, very similar to the breathing of a sleeping human being. A slow cadence, and a very good sound to use if you ever have problems sleeping. So I won't leave it on for too long right now. The second way sound affects us is psychologically, and music is the greatest example of this, of course. This piece of music isn't going to make you feel happy. It wasn't designed to. It's a sad piece. Music's not the only kind of sound that affects our emotions, our feelings, our moods, though. At my company, the sound agency, we often deploy birdsong because birdsong makes most people feel secure. We've learned over hundreds of thousands of years that when the birds are happily singing like this, things are probably okay. Also, nature's alarm clock, time to be awake when the birds are singing, so it's a very good sound to work to. The third way sound affects us is cognitive. You can't understand two people talking. You're on the same track. Or in try this case, listening to the presenter twice. It's not possible. We have bandwidth for around 1.6 human conversations. So people who have to work in offices that sound like this, particularly if you can hear one person talking behind you when you're trying to think, really struggle to be productive. Research varies, but all of the studies show that noise in open plan offices is disastrous for productivity. So sound affects how well we can think. The fourth way sound affects us is behaviorally. Of course it does with all those other things going on. So ask yourself, is this person going to drive at a steady 28 miles per hour? Somehow I doubt it, and in fact the research shows that pounding music like this, or whatever that is for you, tends to cause us to drive faster, closer to the current front, change lane more often, and so forth. Sound changes our behavior. At the simplest, we will move away from unpleasant sound if we can. So if I were to put this on and leave it for the rest of this presentation, I don't think you'd be sitting there with your headphones on. I think you'd be off doing something else. Of course you would. This is a lesson that retailers are only just now starting to learn, because inappropriate sound causes us to leave spaces. Fast-paced music makes people move faster, and every retailer knows that dwell time is sell time. And this particular study found that shoppers spent 38% more when slow-paced sound was playing. But how many times have you been in a store or a mall with fast-paced music playing in the mistaken belief that it'll make everybody energized and cheerful? Retailers are just starting to learn this lesson now. And a sound condition can change not only whether we stay in a space, but what we buy. Here's a fascinating study which was done by some academics, and there were 2 gondola ends in a supermarket, one with French wine, one with German wine, nothing between the visual displays at all, and all they did was to alternate the music condition. On day 1, a little bit of this. And on day 2, a little bit of that. And they just kept going. So what were the results? On the French music days, French wine outsold German wine by 5 bottles to 1, which may not be surprising. It does sell more in the world. However, on the German music days, German wine outsold French wine by 2 bottles to 1. This is not going into a supermarket, listening and saying, German music, therefore I should buy German wine. Most of the people surveyed had not even noticed the music. This is purely unconscious response to a barely perceived sound condition, and what a shift in behavior. One last piece of evidence from my own company. We were commissioned a few years ago to install a restful, nature-based soundscape in the main street of Lancaster, California, up in the Mojave Desert. Well, the shopkeepers loved it, and the sheriff reported that crime fell by 15% after the installation. That one made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Sound can either help us or it can hurt us. Beneficial sound can release happy hormones, whereas unpleasant sound, noise, tends to release cortisol and stress us. Blood pressure reduces with calming sound, but it definitely increases in noise, leading to long-term increased risk of heart attack and stroke. Sound can aid or disrupt our concentration, our mental effectiveness, and it can help our well-being or lead to fatigue and long-term illness. So sound has great power, but like any sense, we can't take it in isolation. The senses affect one another in what are called cross-modal effects. I'll demonstrate this to you with one of the few auditory illusions that exist. Please look at the screen and listen to what this guy is saying.
Ba, 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 ba.
Now you're probably hearing da-da.
Ba, 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 ba.
Now close your eyes and listen.
Ba, 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 ba.
The sound is actually ba-ba.
Ba, ba.
But on the video, he's saying gaga. So your brain puts these together and creates da-da. If you open your eyes again and look again, you'll hear da-da.
Ba, 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 ba.
Even though you now know the truth. This is the McGurk illusion, and it works on about 9 out of 10 people. The senses affect one another. Here are some examples in play in something close to marketing. In this test, people were given crisps to bite into whilst wearing headphones, which were feeding back to them the sound of their crunching. When the higher frequencies were boosted in the headphones, people reported that the crisps were 15% crisper and fresher. So the sound of our eating affects mouthfeel. That's sound affecting haptics. Sound can affect brand experience too. When CFCs were banned, this brand, which is of course Lynx in the UK, had to redesign its packaging. And instead of going tst, it was going f. And people started to complain that the product was no longer as strong as it used to be. It didn't work as well. So they invested a lot of money on repackaging it without CFCs so that, again, it goes psst. And again, people are very happy with it. The sound of the packaging affected how well people thought the actual product was working. One final example. A 2011 study found that high levels of noise in restaurants depress our ability to taste, particularly sweet and salt. Maybe restaurateurs will take note of this. Noise is not the same as buzz, and if they care about our experience, they need to stop sending us home with a sore head and a sore throat after bellowing at our dinner companion for hours. If you line the senses up and design so they're all pointing in the same direction, you benefit from something called super additivity. Add congruent sound to vision, and the result is a dramatic change in people's experience. 1 + 1 is not 2 in the world of super additivity. It can be much, much greater. So I hope I've been able to persuade you of the power of sound and why we need to get intentional about it in marketing. Sadly, though audio branding is now quite a fast-growing industry, it's still very small, and very few brands have yet taken this lesson on board. Martin Lindstrom's book Brand Sense contained a major study done by Millward Brown, which found that over 80% of the Fortune 500 companies' marketing budgets were devoted to visual communication. But that's out of proportion when you set it against people's own ranking of the importance of each sense for them on average. That means there's a huge opportunity around here. Of course, there's an even bigger gap with smell, and there is indeed a fragrance marketing industry, but you can't say specific things with scent, and you can't broadcast it. For those two reasons, sight and sound are the two major communication channels, and the resource allocation between them is out of whack. Well, this research is 17 years old now, but things honestly haven't changed that much, as we'll see. The Organizational Listening Project surveyed a range of organizations from very large to SMEs, and their findings make depressing reading. Not surprising, I suppose, because if you put a bunch of people who aren't listening very well together into an organization, you're going to get an organization that doesn't listen very well. You would hope that organizations would roughly balance the inputs and outputs, taking equal care about speaking and listening, but sadly, no. The surveyed organizations reported that they spent just 20% on average of their time, budget, and effort on listening, 80% on outbound, which I suppose is not surprising. When you say corporate communication, what you think of immediately is advertising, PR, social media posts, online videos, all outbound. It's also worth mentioning that this number was self-reported, so it's probably an exaggeration. We all like to think we listen more and better than we actually do. Well, you have to ask, does this really matter? Yes, it does. The analysis of the data shows that the organizations ranked as better listeners in the survey had more of the things on the green side of this chart. Those ranked towards the bottom of the listening table had more of the red side. Which side would you like to be on? So the need to start listening and designing with sound is urgent. And it's urgent especially in marketing because our profession is undergoing not one, but two revolutions. One in marketing itself, and another in audio. And they've both been created by the unstoppable force that is technology. The marketing revolution has happened pretty much, driven largely by the unprecedented interconnectedness of billions of people with smart devices. All of these shifts are either well underway or complete, I would say. The battle for attention has never been more desperate. The speed of communication is orders of magnitude faster than 40 or even 20 years ago, and peer review and social media make the CMO's job something like driving a speedboat in rocky waters. Where once we intruded on people's time using one-to-many media and overcame reluctance with clever creative work, we now have to ask permission. And if we do it right, we engage in a personal conversation. Text and pictures are steadily being displaced by audio and video, and interactivity is just expected. Once brands could sell based on a promise. Now they have to deliver consistent experience that adds real value. Once marketers controlled brands, now customers and influencers constantly refashion their meaning, so it's really a process of co-creation, a partnership with powerful stakeholders, not a diktat to passive consumers. I've always hated that word anyway. It's a battle for hearts, not minds, and the fastest way to engage the emotions is by ensuring that all the senses are congruent, especially those that deeply impact us on a precortical level. In this new world, reputation is critical, but it's volatile. Brands have never been more valuable or more vulnerable. And the Holy Grail is a committed, long-term relationship, which, of course, requires listening. After all, what's the most common complaint in any relationship? There is one new role that I believe the smarter brands will adopt, because it'll be so highly valued and it'll forge lasting relationships. Because the downside of interconnectedness for us all is a tidal wave of stuff coming at us in email, in text, in instant messaging. And behind that tidal wave, there's an even bigger mountain of all the stuff we could be accessing but don't have time to or don't know about. The opportunity cost of what we choose to do every minute is now more evident to us than it has ever been before, and it creates a modern paranoia that goes by the name of FOMO, fear of missing out. This isn't perfect knowledge in perfect competition, it's a blizzard, and it's hard to navigate in one of those. If you're lost in a blizzard, what you need is a trusted guide. Someone to dissolve the feeling of overwhelm and give us confidence that we're being led to the most valuable, high-quality content that does not waste our time. We've all heard the phrase content is king, but today, content on its own is not enough. Content is king only if it has value and if it's delivered in the right way, through the right channels. Hence the rise of branded content, which came out of contract publishing, the industry I helped to establish between 1988 and 2003. At first, contract publishing was left field. Brands we approached would say, "We're not publishers, why do we need a magazine?" But it grew into a £1 billion industry, and it became the largest sector of UK magazine publishing. Now, of course, the focus has shifted online, and podcasting is the hot ticket, as we'll see in a moment. Brands can be the stars of the virtual universe if they create or attract relevant content that transcends their core offering. Hence, Red Bull TV or General Electric's sci-fi podcast, The Message. That one got 6 million downloads. The intention is to build trust, because trust is the key that unlocks the door to relationship and attention. So that's a little bit about the marketing revolution. What about the audio revolution? What do I mean when I say there's an audio revolution? Well, it also is well underway, and you're probably taking part in it right now. We've struggled with becoming our own PAs for a long time now. Pins, e-commerce forms, poring over peer reviews before buying anything, checking email, and now the Internet of Things. I don't know about you, but I do not desire a conversation with my fridge. Thank you very much. Well, this is all about to change. You may well already have a smart speaker, or be used to making voice queries and instructions on a headset to Siri or Alexa or Hey Google. The technology of these devices is moving apace. Wearables will be the future and eventually embedded technology in our skulls. It's not a coincidence that Apple spent so much money acquiring Dr. Dre. And these devices, whether littered around our houses or built into our bodies, will be communicating with something in the middle, an intelligent agent, really intelligent, using AI, a bit like Jarvis in Iron Man, not menu-driven, but learning as it goes. And we will be speaking to this and listening to it rather than typing and reading. Now, there's a battleground ahead. Who will own the IA? Will it be Apple? Will it be Google? Will it be Amazon? Will it be us? This will be vital because the IA will own all our data, it will know our preferences, and it will be a gatekeeper as well. What does all this mean for brands? Well, I think this summarizes the task pretty well. In a world where we're largely speaking to and listening to the internet, it's not a good idea to spend over 80% of a marketing budget on visual communication. But of course, no brand is silent right now. As I often remind marketing directors who start getting excited about, oh, let's do some sound in the future, they already are doing sound. It's just unplanned. And if it's not designed, the odds are it's noise and it's working against the brand, not for it. So continuing to make undesigned noise is an equal sin in an auditory world. Very few brands would leave their look and feel to chance. Well, now is the time to start designing with our ears. So the big question, of course, is how do you do that? Well, it starts first and foremost with listening. Listening to every touch point, journey, communication, space, whether physical or virtual, because listening creates relationship, and relationship is the holy grail. Well, let me explain in practical terms how to do audio branding in a few minutes. At the Sound Agency, we use a 4-step process, probably very similar to that deployed by traditional agencies. Plan it, design it, deploy it, and develop it. The it, in our case, being a range of what we call sonic assets. At the center of the process should be guidelines. It's still the case that very few brand books have anything at all in them about sound. Every great brand is about consistency, and that means audio brand guidelines are essential to ensure that. They need to cover these 5 core sonic assets and at least these 8 contexts or interactions, most of which use more than one sonic asset. In planning, it's quite simple to create a matrix where you have sonic assets on one axis and contexts on the other, and you just decide which things work best for your particular brand, market, customers, stakeholders, and tick boxes to put the 2 things together. Although this kind of thinking about sound is relatively new, the use of sound in marketing actually has a long history. Street callers and costermongers have been shouting their wares for centuries. In fact, there are records of people complaining about the noise in ancient Rome. I well remember from my own childhood the cries of "any old iron" from the Rag and Bone Man. Probably the closest modern equivalent is the ice cream van. In the UK, those have generic chimes, but in Sweden, the Hemglas brand well, that's absolutely iconic in Sweden and known the nation over. There are 3 types of sound that are used in marketing. First, we have music, of course. It started in the form of the Wheaties jingle way back in 1926.
Have you tried Wheaties? They're whole wheat with all of the brands. You try Wheaties, for wheat is the best food of man. They're crispy and crunchy the whole year through. The kiddies never tire of them, and neither will you. Just try Wheaties, the best breakfast food in the land.
Well, Wheaties sales soared, and the jingle was born, hugely popular pretty much all the way through to the early 90s, when perhaps the internet changing the way we related to advertising sounded their death knell. Let me give you a couple of iconic examples of music in the form of jingle. Here's the famous US Kit Kat Give Me a Break jingle.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me a break. Give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Give me a break. Give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. You can keep it to yourself.
And here's one that might bring back memories to the more senior marketers, perhaps, from the UK in the 60s.
The hands that do dishes can feel soft at your face with mild green fairy liquid.
So that's a little bit about music in advertising. The second type of sound is sound effects. MGM have been using this. Well, since 1928, pretty much from the dawn of talkies, although the lion was there before that, he was just mute. And we can remember iconic sound effects like plink, plink, fizz, or shh, you know who, or snap, crackle, and pop. Last but not least, we have voice. Tony the Tiger's been saying this since 1951.
Right!
And the Green Giant, this since 1959.
Ho, ho, ho.
Green Giant.
And for years, Geoffrey Palmer was the iconic voice of Audi in the UK with this laconic delivery.
Vorsprung durch technique, as they say in Germany.
Research has consistently proved that, as with movies, in advertising, it's sound that packs the emotional punch and also delivers recall. I'm going to play you my favourite TV ad of all time, which brings together music, voice, and effects at a whole new level. Listen carefully, and I'll ask you a question afterwards.
He waits. That's what he does. I'll tell you what. Tick followed tock, followed tick, followed tock, followed tick. Ahab says, I don't care who you are, here's to your dream. The old sailors returned to the bar. Here's to you, Ahab! And the fat drummer hit the beat with all his heart. Here's to waiting.
Brilliant use of all three elements, music, voice, and sound effects, not to mention silence there. But did you hear the glass of Guinness going down on the bar? It's in there. Music is used much more widely than just in advertising, of course, because it's hugely powerful. We recognize it very fast, like this. And even if you didn't get that, you'll associate this with something. That's 2 seconds of music. How powerful is that? Some brands have very strong associations with music. I'm sure you'll all know this sound as part of BA's brand. It's the Flower Duet from Lakmé by Delibes. But when BA sacked M&C Saatchi in 2005, the new agency, who shall remain nameless, decided to have a spring clean and came up with this.
We believe your holiday should start before you arrive. You're our guest.
Well, that song is Leaving on a Jet Plane, which seems like a good idea until you realise the second line is Don't know when I'll be back again, which may not be the best message for travellers or their families. And that song was written by John Denver, who, died in a plane crash. Well, regardless of those unfortunate associations, BA received literally thousands of complaints when that happened from upset customers who knew something BA had ignored. That music is part of its brand. It's a serious asset that they were simply throwing away. Well, they reclaimed it pretty quickly, of course. Well, we could spend a whole talk on what's called the band brand space, but for now, let's pass on to what blossomed as jingles withered in the 1990s. The Sonic logo. Now, I'm not sure how many of you could draw Intel's logo, but I reckon probably a lot of you could sing me da-da-da-da, because it's the most iconic Sonic logo probably ever written. Back in 1993, this was Walter Wazawa who wrote it for Intel. It was designed to mimic the cadence Intel Inside, and it's 1-4, 1-5 in musical terms, which is absolutely classic. In the key of D flat, here it is. Now, Intel's brand is worth around $40 billion, according to Interbrand, and I reckon that Sonic logo is a good chunk of that. Let me give you a second example, which I think is very interesting. SNCF, the French railway company, commissioned a quirky and very effective Sonic logo that sounds like this. You hear that on the train, on the platforms, on the telephone, on the website, everywhere. And when Dave Gilmour, the former Pink Floyd guitarist, was travelling in France, he heard that, he loved it, and he licensed it. And it became the title track on his album of the time.
From the burning lake or the eastern gate, you'll get through it.
That's a rare case of pop music licensing a brand. It's normally the other way around. One more example of best practice I'll give you is my favourite Sonic logo of all time. THX is all about quality sound in cinemas, so if you're going to design something to express quality sound, it had better be quality. And Lucasfilm managed to do just that when they created this sound. It's called Deep Note, and it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. Enjoy this. Truly epic. Well, if we scan down Interbrand's top 100 brands, we'll find a few more interesting examples. Number 5 brand is Samsung, who have just launched this. The 9th biggest brand, McDonald's, very familiar. And at number 41, there's Netflix, which has become iconic with its double knock. A couple you may know from outside the top 100. Here's T-Mobile. You'll notice that mimics the number of dots in the logo as a phrase. And here is Yahoo. Now, not all Sonic logos are hits. In 2007, somebody at Mercedes thought that this expressed the brand perfectly. Yeah, not sure where that came from. It didn't stay around too long, not surprisingly. Interesting to note, however, how many major brands do not yet have a Sonic logo. Even those which are very involved in sound, like Amazon and Apple with their smart speakers, no Sonic logo. No Sonic logo either for Facebook, Twitter, or many other top brands. There is still scarcity value in a Sonic logo. So music can be hugely powerful however you deploy it, and very valuable, but voice matters too. The first time I got on a Virgin Atlantic aeroplane many years ago, as I entered the plane, the stewardess said, "Hello, sexy." I remember that very well because it's the only time anybody's ever said that to me, and also because it was somewhat surprising. But actually, think about it, she understood that Virgin brand perfectly. At the time, it was a cheeky, irreverent challenger brand with plenty of personality, taking on the might of rather less characterful giant airlines. In 2 words, I think she got the brand across to me. Whatever the brand, if it has vocal interactions, it needs to be clear about its voice. I'm not talking here about tone of voice, I'm talking about the actual voice and what it says. Is it old or young? Is it formal or cheeky, like Virgin was? Is it happy and energetic, or is it serious and considered? Is it masculine or feminine? Does it have an accent? Does it use a slogan? If we define all of these, we can start to achieve some degree of consistency. A couple more important asset classes. Earcons are not Sonic logos. They tend to be situational, often associated with product use rather than the brand overall. Nokia is a great example of this. You may not recognize this piece of music, but you will in a moment. This is Grand Valse by Francisco Torija. About here. Well, when Nokia used that tune in a 1992 TV commercial, it proved very popular, and it was the only one out of the candidate ringtones that was out of copyright. So we got this. For years, that was the most played tune in the world. Skype is synonymous with this iconic sound. And although this is not a default sound, this might have some of you reaching for your pockets. So earcons can be very powerful reminders of the company you're dealing with, the brand you're dealing with. Now, the last asset class I want to cover is soundscape, sound in physical spaces. This is an example from our work. In Glasgow Airport, our brief was to reduce stress because airports can be stressful places. So we created this very calming soundscape. Birdsong, if you remember, makes people feel reassured, very slow tempo. And the airport was pretty happy because, as well as relaxing people, what happened is that sales in the main duty-free shop went up by 10%. I guess people felt they had more time to go shopping. Another good example, this is BP, and service station toilets are perhaps not places that most of us enjoy being in. BP recognized that, and they developed a program called 5-Star Bathrooms, where they put up nice vinyls like this, and we put in Birdsong. Customer satisfaction for the whole service station went up by 50%, and many people mentioned the Birdsong because it surprised and delighted them. One final example. This is Kamppi Mall in Helsinki. We put in soundscapes in all sorts of areas of that mall, and the result was that dwell time went up by 8%, and sales for the tenants went up by 10%. That represents an increase of 25 million euros a year. So those are the 5 asset classes. Let's have a quick look at some of the touch points around them to finish off with. One I want to mention in particular because I think it's really important: podcasting. In the US, 67 million people are listening to podcasts each month. I've already mentioned that GE had 6 million downloads to a couple of shows of its podcast, The Message, which wasn't about GE at all. It was a science fiction story, but everybody knew who sponsored it. eBay's Open for Business topped the iTunes charts. Podcast advertising revenue is going to top 1 billion this year. It's the fastest form of marketing in the world at the moment. And that's not surprising because it works. NPR says that 75% of listeners took action on a sponsored message in podcasting. Truly one to watch at the moment. Product sound as well can be crucial. I wonder how many Harley Davidsons have been sold simply because of this sound. Kellogg's has trademarked a crunch, and for some reason Apple has killed the switch-on sound of the Mac, though I have happily discovered that you can reincarnate it. Product sound can be the name of the product, or the sound of using it, or the sound of its packaging. Remember Lynx? And there's a reason why crisp packets rustle, of course. The more rustly the packet, the more crisp we think the crisps are. Or it can be the sound of a whole space, like Bacardi with party sound and Latin music. Finally, let me talk about the biggest loser of all, the worst class of sound out there: telephone sound. Automated call handling systems designed by technical people, not marketing people. We all know the frustration of press 1 for this, press 2 for that, multiple layers of menus, no human being in sight, no way to talk to a human being. Older people hate these things, and we have an aging population everywhere in the world. The recorded voices don't help much either, because telling tired lies like we're experiencing higher than normal call volumes or your call is very important to us does not build trust. If you finally get through to a call center, the odds are they have some sort of a mandate to minimize time to clear, it's called. That is reducing to a minimum the time you're actually talking to customers. I guess they'd be happy if that got down to 0 and you had no customer conversations at all. I think this has got somewhat upside down, hasn't it? I am absolutely in no doubt there are trillions of dollars being lost here in the sound of angry people hanging up phone calls and never talking to that company again. So there you have it, a crash course in audio branding. Guidelines, assets, and contexts or situations. I hope you might have a couple of actions in mind now, a couple of things on your to-do list. First of all, designing with your ears as well as with your eyes. That's revolutionary. You might want to audit any brands that you're associated with, have a listen to the way that they are coming across, and ask whether the sound is congruent and helpful. Most of all right now, prepare for the revolution. Try the new tools that are available, perhaps podcasting or perhaps a sonic logo. Be a trusted guide if you can. Gather content around you. And most important of all, of course, listen. Let me leave you with 4 golden rules for commercial sound. First of all, try and make sure that all the sound you make is congruent with your brand personality, your brand values, and all your other brand assets, visual and otherwise. Second, make sure that every sound you deploy is appropriate to the situation and the people and what they're trying to do. Third, try to make sure that all the sound is valuable. If it's not delivering value, probably don't make it. And finally, test it and keep testing it, because this is complicated. There's a lot of research out there. Sometimes it contradicts itself. So the best way is to test and test and test again to arrive at sound that truly does represent your brand and forge that relationship. Well, thank you very much for your attention today. And if you have any questions, I would be delighted to answer them or to have a call. Just email me at julian.treasure@thesoundagency.com.